Hey guys, and welcome to today's episode of Quite Frankly. Today we're going to talk about something that's very dear to my heart, and it's called total disaster prevention. For many years we run a computer company, and one of the things that really always struck me as odd was when people came in crying, "I lost all my data." My question was always, "Did you make a backup?" And the answer often was no. One of the most important things when you do a lot of data storage is making backups. Now on the road we use these small LaCie hard drives that are really great, but if you use these in the studio, well, they will stack up, because you need a lot of room. Now, of course, there are many solutions out there, like towers, where you can put in like 5 hard drives and then 1 cable to your computer. We call that port multiplying. And all those hard drives will show up as several volumes. So for example, drive F, G, H, I, and J. On a Windows system or on the Mac, it will just show up with the name they give, the name you actually gave the drive. The problem is in Lightroom, that means that you see a lot of drives. Wouldn't it be easier to have one big drive with one letter where you can find all your files, but it's also safe? Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of those solutions, and this is the one that we use in our studio and I absolutely love. This is the DROBO 5C. This is the DROBO that's actually connected by USB 3 or USB-C. One of the things that I really like about this is the simplicity in which it works. For example, the front. It's magnetic, you take it off, and inside there's actually a quick guide. And it's as easy as this. If it's green, it's okay. And all the other colors will actually tell you what you have to do. Now, how many drives can the DROBO hold? This one can hold 5 drives. And it's really easy to change one of those drives. You just click here, and the drives come out. Now, one of the main advantages of the DROBO is you don't need to put the drives into an extra casing. For example, with my old system, I had to put the drive in a case, and I had to use very special screws which were delivered with the case. So you know what happens after a few years, right? You lose the screws. Otherwise they won't fit inside my tower because the screws were too big. A lot of hassle. With the DROBO, no problem, you just put in the drive totally there. And click, and there we go. Okay, and just put the magnetic casing in front again. Now, how does a system like this work? In essence, you have 5 drives, but they don't show up as 5 drives. They will show up as one volume. And now let me talk about this a little bit differently, that it's easier to understand. Normally, if you have 2 drives, for example, one with RAW files and one with retouched files, and one of those drives fail, you lose your RAW files or you lose your retouched files. Of course, you have a second backup. And I always advise to also make a third backup that's actually off-site, so with your parents or a friend or in the bank or wherever you want to keep it. But you will lose data. The problem is with bigger drives, like 4 terabyte drives, 6 terabyte drives, if you have to replace one of those drives, oh man, that takes a lot of time to copy all those files to the new drive. This system works a little bit differently. It uses a system that's called RAID. Now what is RAID? In essence, it doesn't use one drive to store all your data and a second drive to store the other data. It actually uses all 5 drives together as one volume to store all your data. Now here you're going like, oh Frank, that's terrible, because if one of those drives fails, I lose all my data because it's one big volume. That's not true. That's where the RAID system really shines. Because it doesn't give you, for example, if you use 5 4 terabyte drives, it doesn't give you 5 times 4 terabyte storage. It gives you way less. And this is because there's, let's call it a security layer. So if one of those drives fail, you just take out the drive and you put in a new drive. The system will rebuild itself and you won't lose any data. The cool thing is, you just continue working. It will be a little bit slower, but you probably won't even notice it. The other cool thing about a system like this is, let's say that you start up with 4 terabyte drives, 5 times 4, Frank, that's more than enough. I don't need any more data. Well, Maybe 2 years later, you do. Now, in the old system, when you take out a 4 terabyte drive and you replace it with a 6, there you go again. A lot of copy work. With a system like this, with a RAID, you actually take out a 4 terabyte drive and you put in a 6 terabyte. The system will rebuild itself and now you have more storage. So that works really great. Now this is the 5C version. They also have versions over the network. They also have versions that store more drives. And you have versions that actually have really great apps. For example, as soon as you come in your studio and you're on the same Wi-Fi network as your DROBO, it starts downloading all the files from your iPhone or any other device, of course, into your DROBO. You can give people access to certain folders, a little bit like an online storage system. But this one is only USB-C or USB 3 because I don't need that stuff, but maybe you do. Okay, another cool thing about DROBO, and that's also in the 5C actually, is what happens if the power goes down. Now, if you have all that data scattered around several drives, you can imagine that if the power goes down, it can be a disaster, because now all those drives will have a little bit of data and, well, you could destroy your RAID. With the DROBOs, there's a very little battery inside, and that will give you just enough time, or actually you don't have to think about it, the DROBO does. So that little battery takes time, that if the power goes down, it actually stores the data that's in transfer already to the DROBO to a little piece of flash memory. As soon as the power comes back on, it will actually store it on the drives, and it gives the DROBO enough time to shut down the drives correctly so you don't lose any data. Another thing that's really cool, and that's also something you don't have to worry about, is that every so often the DROBO will check all your personal files, but also the files on the DROBO itself for integrity. Now, with other systems, you actually have to do this manually. The DROBO does it totally automatically for you every 30 and 90 days, depending on the system. So that's also really cool, because now if something goes wrong, the DROBO will actually let you know, or it will just repair itself. Now, I can talk a lot about systems like this, but let me take it to the short route. You really need a good backup system. You need a system that doesn't give you any downtime if something goes wrong. You need a system that if you want to expand the system, you don't need to spend hours and hours copying files, because when you copy files, there's a big chance that you have data corruption, there's a chance that you forget a file, that you forget a whole directory, and there's a lot of chance that, well, you can earn a lot more money by just doing your job instead of copying files. So DROBO, in my opinion, at the moment, one of my favorite pieces of kit in our studio. And the other thing that really helps, compared to the old system I used, this one is dead silent. And as soon as I turn on my computer, the DROBO powers on. As soon as I turn off my computer, the DROBO actually goes to sleep. So, what more can I tell you? Well, let me show you the app very quickly so I can show you how you can manage your DROBO on the Windows. Okay, so let's take a look at the DROBO app. Now, the first thing you will notice is that if I open up my Finder, or in this case Explorer, there's only one drive, and that's called the DROBO. If I go there, you can see that I have my RAW and retouched images there. So open the RAWs and you see all the photography stuff. Open the retouched and you see all the photography stuff. I always believe to have two folders, one for the retouched, one for the RAW files, because, well, that makes it easier to find. And there you can also see that in the past I actually used two different setups. One drive for retouched, one drive for RAW files. Okay, so it works as one drive, so that's easy. But also managing the DROBO is really easy. You just open up their app, and here you see DROBO Dashboard. Now, if you have several DROBOs in your system, this is the way to manage them all. But let's just go to my DROBO 5C. Now, I see that it's filled up with 6 terabyte drives and one 2 terabyte drive. On the bottom of the DROBO, you see all these blue lights. So those blue LEDs show you how full your DROBO is. So you don't need to open up the app, you just look at those LEDs and you can see, it's almost full, so let's add another drive. It also shows you the health, so it's good. And it gives you a lot of other stuff of information, of course, drive information. So which drives are here, Western Digitals. And you can see that per bay. You can also do it like this, of course, and just browse to it. And you can also see the performance. For example, You can see the read throughput or the write throughput. Let's copy something to our DROBO, for example. Let's go to our final shots. Let's go to the DROBO and just copy it there. You can actually see that the DROBO tops out at around 209, 210 megabytes a second. And that's pretty fast. And that's of course because you're not using one drive, but you're actually using several drives combined. Now if you're one of the more expensive DROBOs, you can also put in an accelerator SSD inside. But on the 5C, that option isn't there. So if you want more speed, for example for video editing, that's when you can start using that SSD to accelerate the system a little bit. But in all honesty, if you want to do video editing, I really advise you to do that on SSDs inside your computer. But for storage, the DROBO works great. And with an extra SSD, well, for 180p material, you can probably get away with it. Now you also have tools, of course. You can turn your lights on or off. You can rename it. You can format it, shut down, reset, check for updates. Well, let's see if there's an update. Now, it already is scheduled to do an update, and you can change your DROBO settings. So within this app, you can do everything for the DROBO, and that's the cool thing. No fancy menus, no stuff where you have to go like, what does this mean? It's really simple. So if you're a little bit afraid for tech, or you go like, I just want a system that I put down there and it just works, we highly recommend the DROBO. Okay, of course you want to know, how about warranty? What happens if a DROBO breaks down? Well, you can actually get something called DROBO Care. Now on the more expensive models, this is free. But on the other models you can actually buy this. Now what is DROBO Care? It actually means if your DROBO fails, they will actually send you a new one in the repair period. So in other words, you don't have to wait for your DROBO to be repaired. You can work right on. Another advantage of the DROBO that it didn't address yet is actually the size. You saw it here. It's a small device. Now when we go on a trip or on holiday or for work, I always take out my hard drives and store them at home. For the very simple reason, if there's a disaster in our studio, I don't want to lose my hard drives. And if there's a disaster at home and in the studio, I probably don't have to go back home. So the DROBO is that small that I don't have to take my hard drives out. I just disconnect the DROBO, I put it under my arm and just walk away with it. If you have any questions, please leave comments below. If you have other opinions, also leave comments below. If you like what we do, subscribe to our channel and of course like and share with other people. Hey guys, my name is Frank Doorhof and I see you next time in another episode of Quite Frankly.